Hello and welcome to this week's edition of The Mediator with me, your host Brian West, here to give you your top 8 headlines and developing news stories that made it throughout the week. These top 8 stories are only documented for records and to highlight topics for those in the business of talk radio, talk media, and those who just want to stay informed. Now let's get to the top 8 stories that made it into the media this week. Story number 1, ladies and gents, using art to save your country. When things are going wrong, sometimes you have to replace a bad habit with a good habit. In the capital of the Central African Republic, a man named Dider Kasay has caught the attention of his community by using comic books to influence the masses, something his father assumed would not amount to anything. He's using drawing and arts and comic books to save his community. Even though a story like this may not catch that much steam, it shows that art can influence a community, and not only communities but children. For centuries, people have debated on what use art has in countries searching for or trying to maintain a moral compass. Some people have thought art to be useless, but it seems that some countries are finding a way to let art in. Countries like Saudi Arabia is also a country that's opening up new doors for artists to thrive, but many artists are still facing resistance depending on their art style. If this story stays in the news, it will be used to paint a picture of a better way to view the world, a world still struggling for ways to patch up wounds with something a bit more constructive, like painting pictures and using art and comic books to change your community. Story number 2, why segregation and other biases can hinder a nation's creativity. An article that surfaced about the importance of people having many different types of friends. This may be the answer to the world's problems, knowing different types of people. Now, just so you know, about 75 to 85% of the world's conflicts are created when other groups feel that they have the answers to the world's problems, or they feel that they are superior compared to their rival groups. This ideology often leads to conflict and wars. It seems that there are some new stats that show that people who have many different types of friends and understand other cultures, they seem to live a better and more peaceful life with less conflict. If this story gains any momentum, it will probably be because of the battle that we continue to face of the growing problem with religious and racial violence across the world. Story number 3. Which party will suffer more if campaign workers unionize? In every election, there are campaign workers, and we are coming up on a very, very important election season. But we have to ask ourselves, what party will suffer the most if campaign workers decide to unionize? To get a picture of what would happen if campaign workers unionize, you would have to understand what would happen if worker bees started building their own hives to save them when promoting the queen, if that makes sense. Well, to explain, that means that less willingness and more organization when it comes to pay may change things. If this story gains any attention, you may notice elections being run strategically different in regards to campaign workers unionizing. Now, political influence has a lot to do with how we operate our daily lives, if you haven't noticed already here in America. And just like coaches find a way to win games and players find a way to win fans, political gurus find a way to win votes, especially political gurus who are running a campaign and trying to get their candidate elected. And some campaign workers will find any way in their orchestrated playbook to win an election. As the election season approaches, this story may gain more steam. Stay tuned. Story number 4. Is the new generation just working for the moment with lack of attention on the future? Question. Many financial advisors are always looking for those looking to brighten their financial future. That means they're keeping an eye out for people wanting to make some financial gain in this world. This story focusing on retirement caught my attention and bumped it up to number 4 because studies show that many new age Americans have a very low financial IQ, and some are bringing in money for working without putting any money away. If you don't know the basics of how finances work and how the value of the dollar decreases almost every year, then you may not understand the importance of putting money away. And you may not understand the importance of a story like this and how it can gain someone's attention, especially if they're in bad financial shape. Creating a habit to save or even building on what you have could not only impact the future of an individual, but it can strengthen the financial capabilities of a country. That means that if the citizens of the country are in good financial shape, then that can put the country in good financial shape. As more attention is geared towards the future of America's finances, I expect stories like these to gain more attention, especially as people start talking about retirement and the growing problem that America has with debt. Story number 5: the attack on conspiracy gurus. Anybody who listens to radio or surfs the web may know the names of all of the big time conspiracy gurus out there. And right now, they seem to be making some headlines. The fake news attack is real, folks, and there are some details being left out. A few weeks ago, the nation witnessed a gun attack on YouTube, and later to find out that the attacker has some ties with some underground networks. While many smaller independent news networks have a different way in reporting stories like the incident at YouTube, we have to wonder what news would be like without different takes on such stories. Some say it's a conspiracy that Alex Jones, a well-known news analyst on YouTube, is under attack for some of his news reporting. They call him the godfather of conspiracies, and some believe that he is only under attack because of his involvement with the Trump campaign. That's why it's such a conspiracy. The fact is, there is a war going on in America, and in every heroic situation there is a tragedy. As more becomes revealed about President Trump, do not expect this developing story to fade away anytime soon. Story number 6: who's right? That's a question. Now, as the wave of religious violence continues without any peaceful resolution in sight, even in the year 2018, scientists, academics, and even high-level religious leaders are still battling with the question of who's right. Christians, Muslims, atheists, Scientologists, somebody's got to be right. If this story continues to gain any steam, putting religion on the spotlight, there may be more people who doubt, especially when it comes to things like the gun debates, talk about war, and people who constantly bring up things like the global apocalypse. That means people who make a lot of business off saying the world is coming to an end. Now, what makes this headline interesting, the headline "Who's Right," is the content that spans from conversations in regard to this topic of discussion. Everybody has an opinion and a theory, but no one really knows, and no one has lived to tell about what happens when you die. Only thing we know is what we see here on this planet. And after years of amazing archaeological achievements, it seems that people still have a hard time finding out what is the most accurate way to live amongst the masses. That means other people, especially when there are so many different cultures and ideological beliefs. Story number 7, and the final 2 stories that made it into the media this week. Why is race still such a hot topic? When you study the history of any country, you may actually be able to track every cause and effect that led up to this point, the point of no return. In understanding this, you may find out why race is still such a hot topic in the United States. Although history cannot be erased, there's a lot of people still trying to improve race relations in the world, especially when it comes to police and other things, political, education, desegregation. But the more they seem to try, the worse it seems to get, just bringing up the topic of race in any discussion. That may be the reason why race issues are staying in headlines. Freedom of the press may be shining light on an issue that is real and has to stay in the news to help us from repeating history. Story number 8, and the final story that made it into the media this week: how being politically correct is changing America and the world. It wasn't long ago that the world engaged in hardcore political affairs to enforce power moves for the greater good of a country. Now, in this evolving story, each part of the world has a style of maintaining and obtaining possessions in the area of politics. In the new world of instant information and social media, there's fact and there's fiction. But when it comes to being politically correct, everyone has an opinion. Many scholars and analysts are taking notice of how being less informed can shape situations of conflict that have little value to the betterment of each party shaping their opinion about political affairs. In the process of deal making, there seems to be little attention towards what benefits will come out of dialogue centered around being politically correct. I will clear this up as I go along. Hopefully it's making some sense. So to simplify the matter, let me explain. People don't seem to have a clear view of what they want in regards to their elected leaders. That means that polarization has taken hold of almost every political situation, not only in America but across the world. Let me give you an example. Some people are against building a wall across the border. So to get a grasp on the matter is basically saying that if there is a wall, it can prevent drugs. If there isn't a wall, then there's a high chance that drugs will be channeled in through the border. As this developing story reaches its climax, many citizens are starting to find out how to better their own situations by becoming political activists rather than engaging in political discussions and getting in debates and heated arguments with other people. To sum up this developing story, it's safe to say that some people are starting to wake up to how democracy really works, and some people are still choosing to stay asleep and not get involved in the fight. A lot of political discussions have to do with the election of President Trump in comparison to the last president, Barack Obama. Well, I want to thank you so much for tuning into the media this week with me, Brian West. Please don't forget to show us some support and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Or if you want to show us some more support, you can go to our website, buy something, click on something, read something, or just watch something. Or you can sponsor a program. I want to thank you so much for tuning into the media this week with the Doctor of Mediation, me, Brian West. Have a good week, everybody.
If you need help, then dial your operator.
Have no fear, fellow citizens.